Hey everyone. Let me ask you something. Can you name a book that was first published back in 1936, nearly 90 years ago, and yet, to this day, still sells hundreds of thousands of copies every single year? A book that's been translated into nearly 40 languages and read by CEOs, politicians, and everyday people alike. That book is How to Win Friends and Influence People. The author is Dale Carnegie. Now, this is a big book, packed with so much wisdom that I'm going to do something a little different. I'm splitting this into 2 episodes. Today is part 1, where we'll cover the 3 core principles of handling people and the 6 ways to make people like you. In part 2, we'll dive into how to win people to your way of thinking and how to lead without creating resentment. Trust me, both episodes are worth your time. You might be thinking, a book about winning people over sounds a little manipulative. And I get that. But here's what I realized after actually reading it: this isn't a bag of tricks. It's a book about how to be a decent human being. Dale Carnegie was born in 1888 to a poor farming family in Missouri. They were so poor that he had to wake up at 4 a.m. every day to milk the cows before walking to school. His clothes were always patched and repatched. The other kids never let him forget it. But Carnegie had an obsession even bigger than poverty: his crippling fear of public speaking. He said that every time he had to stand up and speak, his knees would shake, his voice would crack, and he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. But instead of running from it, Carnegie did something most people wouldn't dare to do: he ran straight into his fear. He joined the debate team. He practiced speaking for hours in front of a mirror. He worked on his voice, his breathing, his posture. After graduation, he bounced from job to job, selling trucks, selling bacon, even trying his hand at acting. Nothing stuck. Then one day, he walked into a YMCA in New York and offered to teach a public speaking class. The YMCA agreed to pay him $2 a session, on one condition: he had to find his own students. Carnegie took the deal. The class grew. Then it exploded. Students kept coming, and they didn't just want to learn how to speak. They wanted to learn how to live. How to deal with their bosses, their coworkers, their spouses, their kids. They were starving for skills that nobody was teaching them. And that's when Carnegie realized, there was no textbook for any of this. So he wrote one himself. He devoured hundreds of biographies, from Theodore Roosevelt to Abraham Lincoln. He interviewed thousands of successful people. He hired a full-time researcher who spent 18 months doing nothing but collecting stories and case studies. The result was How to Win Friends and Influence People, published in 1936. Carnegie had only intended to write a short pamphlet for his students. Instead, it became a publishing phenomenon. Over 30 million copies have been sold. And for 90 years, it has never, not once, fallen off the bestseller lists. But there's something important to understand about Carnegie before we dive into the principles. He didn't write this book from an ivory tower. He tested everything. Every week, his students would come to class and report back: "I tried what you suggested with my boss, and here's what happened." Or, "I used the smile technique with my wife, it actually worked." Carnegie collected thousands of these real-world experiments. When something worked consistently across hundreds of people from all walks of life, he included it. When it didn't, he threw it out. This book isn't theory. It's field-tested human engineering, refined in the messy laboratory of real life. Carnegie opens the book with 3 principles. He calls them fundamental techniques in handling people. But don't let the word techniques mislead you. What he's teaching goes much deeper. These are the 3 foundational principles that every healthy relationship is built on. Principle number 1, don't criticize, don't condemn, don't complain. This is the very first principle in the book. And Carnegie chose a brilliant way to illustrate it. He didn't tell a story about a saint. He told a story about a criminal. Back in the 1930s, there was a notorious gangster in New York named Two Gun Crowley. This man killed without blinking. One day, while sitting in a car with his girlfriend, a police officer approached and asked for his license. Crowley pulled out a gun and shot the officer dead on the spot. Later, he was cornered in his girlfriend's apartment and engaged in a 2-hour shootout with police, wounding several officers. When he was finally captured, Crowley wrote a letter. In it, he said, "Under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one, one that would do nobody any harm. A cold-blooded killer who genuinely believed he was a good person." Carnegie uses this story to make a deeply profound point. Even the worst among us don't believe they're wrong. They always have reasons to justify their actions. Nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks, "Today I'm going to be a terrible person." Everyone believes they're doing the right thing, or at least the reasonable thing, given their circumstances. Carnegie backs this up with something even more uncomfortable. He points to the most hardened criminals in America's most notorious prison, Sing Sing. When he examined their case files, he found that virtually none of them saw themselves as bad people. They were, in their own minds, victims of circumstance. Wrongly accused. Misunderstood. Never wrong. Always justified. So if you criticize them, what happens? They don't say, "Oh, thank you for pointing out my mistake." They get defensive. They search for justifications. And they resent you. Criticism is useless. It wounds people's pride and breeds resentment. Nothing more. Carnegie goes further. He references the research of B.F. Skinner, the renowned psychologist who proved that animals learn far better when rewarded for good behavior than when punished for bad behavior. And here's the unsettling truth: humans are no different. Praise a behavior, and it grows. Criticize it, and the person just learns to hide it better. Criticism doesn't change behavior. It changes how well people conceal it. Carnegie quotes Benjamin Franklin, "I will speak ill of no man, and speak all the good I know of everybody." And then there's Lincoln, who might be the best example of this principle in action. During the Civil War, after the Battle of Gettysburg, General Robert E. Lee's army was retreating, trapped against the Potomac River. It was a golden opportunity to end the war. Lincoln ordered General Meade to attack immediately. But Meade hesitated. He called a council of war. He delayed. And Lee's army slipped across the river and escaped. Lincoln was furious. He sat down and wrote Meade a blistering letter. Every line dripped with frustration. He called the general's actions inexcusable. He questioned his judgment and his courage. But here's what Lincoln did next. He folded the letter, put it in an envelope, and never sent it. Lincoln understood something most of us don't. The criticism might have felt good to write, but it would have accomplished nothing. Meade couldn't undo what had happened. The letter would only wound his pride, breed resentment, and make him a worse general, not a better one. So Lincoln held his fire. And Carnegie points to this as one of the greatest examples of emotional discipline in history. He also quotes Lincoln directly, "Don't criticize them, they are just what we would be under similar circumstances." Principle number 2, give honest and sincere appreciation. Carnegie argues that the deepest craving in human nature isn't money, or sex, or power, it's the desire to feel important. To feel recognized. This is something money can't buy. But a sincere compliment can give someone that feeling, and it costs you nothing. Carnegie shares a heartbreaking story. A woman had been married for 20 years. Every day she cooked, cleaned, and cared for her husband and children. But not once had her husband said, "Thank you," or "I appreciate what you do." One day, she broke down and wanted a divorce. Not because her husband was abusive. Because she felt invisible in her own home. Carnegie drives this home with an example from the business world. Charles Schwab, one of the first men in American history to earn $1 million a year, was once asked the secret of his success. His answer: "I consider my ability to arouse enthusiasm among my people the greatest asset I possess. And the way to develop the best that is in a person is through appreciation and encouragement." Schwab said he never criticized anyone. He believed in giving honest, sincere appreciation, and that alone was enough to turn average workers into extraordinary performers. $1 million a year. Built on thank you. Appreciation is not flattery. Flattery is saying things you don't actually mean. Appreciation is seeing the good in someone and naming it, sincerely. The difference is in the intention. One is manipulation. The other is recognition. Principle number 3, arouse in the other person an eager want. This might be the most important principle in the entire book, and also the most misunderstood. Carnegie isn't teaching you to manipulate people. He's teaching you a simple truth: people do things for their reasons, not yours. If you want someone to do something, don't talk about how it benefits you. Talk about how it benefits them. Put yourself in their shoes. Understand what they want. And show them the path to get it. Carnegie gives a simple but perfect example. A father had a young son who absolutely refused to eat. The parents tried everything: scolding, threatening, begging. Nothing worked. The boy just pushed his food around the plate. Then one day, the father noticed something. The boy had a tricycle, and a bigger, older neighbor kid would come over and ride it. The little boy would cry and throw tantrums. He wanted to stop the bigger kid, but he wasn't strong enough. The father had an idea. At dinner that night, he didn't lecture about nutrition. He didn't say, "Eat or you can't play." Instead, he looked at his son and said, "You know, the reason that big kid can ride your tricycle is because he's strong. He eats his food. If you want to be strong like him and stop him from taking your bike, you need to eat too." The boy cleaned his plate. No arguments. No tears. Not because his father forced him, but because his father understood what the boy truly wanted, and connected the dots for him. That, in a nutshell, is the art of arousing an eager want. Don't push. Connect. Carnegie quotes a renowned law professor: "The ability to put yourself in another person's place and see things from their point of view, that is the single most important ability in any human relationship." Let me connect the dots on these 3 principles, because Carnegie does it so elegantly and it's easy to miss. Don't criticize, because criticism triggers defense, not change. Give appreciation, because everyone is starving for recognition. Arouse an eager want, because people do things for their reasons, not yours. Do you see the thread running through all 3? Every single one requires you to leave your own head and enter someone else's. Criticism is what happens when you project your standards onto others. Appreciation is what happens when you notice what matters to them. And arousing an eager want is what happens when you understand their desires deeply enough to connect them to yours. This is the foundation the entire book is built on. It's not about being clever. It's about being curious. Curious enough about other people to actually understand them. And that, according to Carnegie, is the difference between someone who struggles through every relationship and someone who makes it look effortless. Okay. With that foundation laid, let's move into what is probably the most famous section of the book. This section of the book is probably the most widely read. 6 ways to make people like you. It sounds like a magic formula. But really, these are just things that genuinely kind people do naturally. Way number 1, become genuinely interested in other people. Carnegie tells a small but unforgettable story. He once met a postal worker. He didn't just drop off his mail and leave. He stopped, asked about the man's work, his family, the challenges of being a mail carrier. They talked for about 15 minutes. A few years later, Carnegie ran into that same postal worker. The man still remembered him. He said it was the first time in 20 years on the job that anyone had ever stopped and genuinely asked about him. You see, we're all wrapped up in our own lives. We pass hundreds of people every day. But we rarely stop and truly care about them. That's why a small gesture, just a sincere question, carries so much power. Carnegie said, you can have 10 university degrees. But if you're not genuinely interested in the person in front of you, they'll never truly care about you. And Carnegie practiced what he preached. Everywhere he traveled, he asked about people. Not as a tactic, but because he was genuinely fascinated by human beings. He believed that every person you meet is superior to you in some way, and that if you're truly curious, you can learn something from absolutely anyone. The janitor. The taxi driver. The waiter. Everyone is an expert in their own life. Your job is to become a student of the people around you. Way number 2, smile. Sounds too simple, right? Does smiling really deserve an entire chapter? But Carnegie dedicated one to it, and the story he tells is convincing. A woman came to Carnegie's class. She complained that she had no friends. That her husband no longer loved her. That her life was miserable. Carnegie listened, then said just one thing, try smiling at your husband for 1 week. The woman did it. She started smiling when her husband came home. She smiled when talking to her neighbors. She smiled at the vendor at the market. A week later, she came back to class. Guess what happened? Her husband began smiling back. Neighbors started greeting her. And she made her first real friends in years. A genuine smile is the most powerful signal you can send to another person. It says, I see you. I'm glad you're here. You matter. Carnegie includes an old Chinese proverb that captures this perfectly, a man without a smiling face must not open a shop. Simple wisdom, but think about it. How many businesses have you walked into where the person behind the counter didn't even look up? How did that make you feel? Now compare that to the person who greets you with a warm, genuine smile. The product might be identical, but your entire experience is different. And here's the thing Carnegie emphasizes, you can't fake it. People can spot an insincere smile from across the room. A real smile comes from within, it's not something you put on like a jacket. It has to come from genuinely liking people. Carnegie says that if you don't naturally feel warm toward others, the trick is to actively look for things to appreciate about them. Train yourself to find the good. When you do, the smile takes care of itself. Way number 3, remember people's names. Carnegie says a person's name is the sweetest and most important sound to them, in any language. This isn't a platitude. He proves it with a true story. Andrew Carnegie, the steel tycoon, no relation to the author, was once competing for a multi-million-dollar bridge contract. His rival bid lower. But Andrew Carnegie won. His secret? He remembered the name of the partner company's president. A man he'd met only once, 3 years earlier. But Carnegie saves the most astonishing name-remembering story for a man named Jim Farley. Farley was Franklin D. Roosevelt's campaign manager, the man who helped get FDR elected president. Farley's secret weapon? He could remember 50,000 names. 50,000. He didn't do it with a photographic memory. He did it with a system. Every time he met someone new, he would repeat their name several times in conversation, write it down afterward, and mentally connect the name to specific details about the person, their job, their family, where they lived. Before meeting someone again, he would review his notes, so he could greet them by name and ask about their wife, their kids, the project they mentioned 6 months ago. People didn't just like Jim Farley. They were devoted to him. Because he made every single person feel like they mattered. And it all started with remembering their name. When you remember someone's name, you're telling them they exist. That they're not just another face in the crowd. In a world where everyone is too busy to remember anything, remembering a name is a gift. Way number 4, listen. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Way number 5, talk in terms of the other person's interests. Way number 6, make the other person feel important, and do it sincerely. Let me unpack way number 4 a bit more. Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Carnegie said something I think is worth tattooing on your brain: to be a good conversationalist, be an attentive listener. To be interesting, be interested. Ask questions that other persons will enjoy answering. There's a famous story in the book. Carnegie was invited to a fancy dinner party in New York. There he met a renowned botanist. Carnegie knew nothing about botany. But instead of pretending to be knowledgeable, he simply sat and listened. He asked simple questions. How do you tell different plant species apart? What's the rarest plant you've ever seen? Are there any dangerous plants? The botanist talked passionately for 4 hours. When the party ended, he grabbed Carnegie's hand and told the host that Carnegie was the most fascinating conversationalist he'd ever met. Carnegie barely said a word. But precisely because he listened with his full attention, he became the most fascinating person in the other man's eyes. Here's the paradox: the less you talk about yourself, the more people want to talk to you. Way number 5, talk in terms of the other person's interests. This sounds obvious, but most of us don't do it. When we meet someone, our first instinct is to talk about ourselves. Our work. Our opinions. Our interests. But if you want to make a connection, do the opposite. Find out what the other person cares about, then talk about that. Carnegie shares a story about his friend Theodore Roosevelt. Every time Roosevelt was about to meet someone, whether a senator, a diplomat, or a complete stranger, he would stay up late the night before reading about whatever field that person was interested in. Because he knew that the road to a person's heart is to talk about the things they care about most. Not the things you care about. The things they care about. Carnegie also tells a story that hits closer to home for anyone in business. A salesman named Edward was trying to land a major account with a grocery chain. He'd been calling on the owner for years with no success. The man wouldn't even grant him a meeting. Then Edward did his homework. He discovered the owner was passionate about genealogy and belonged to a historical society. The next time Edward called, he didn't mention his products at all. He simply said, "I understand you're involved with the historical society. I'm researching my own family history and wondered if I could ask your advice." The owner's face lit up. He invited Edward into his office. They talked for over an hour about family trees and old records. At the end of the conversation, without Edward even bringing it up, the owner asked, "So, what was it you wanted to sell me?" Edward walked out with the biggest order of his career. That's the power of talking in terms of the other person's interests. It's not a trick. It's simply treating people like human beings instead of targets. Way number 6, make the other person feel important, and do it sincerely. This one ties all 5 together. And Carnegie spends an entire chapter emphasizing one word: sincerity. You can't fake it. You can't use hollow compliments. People have a finely tuned radar for insincerity. They'll know instantly if you don't actually value them. The story Carnegie tells is moving. A bank employee came to his class. He talked about how isolated he felt, no friends, cold-shouldered by his co-workers. Carnegie told him to do one simple thing: every day, find one genuinely good thing about a coworker and tell them. Not flattery, but real recognition, seeing the good and acknowledging it. A month later, the man came back. He'd made 3 close friends. Everyone in the office was smiling at him. And the most surprising part, he actually started to genuinely like the coworkers he used to dislike. Because when you look for the good in people, you'll find it. And you'll start appreciating them. That's the magic of sincerity. There's a common thread running through all 6 principles: put the other person first. Care about them instead of trying to make them care about you. This is the most interesting paradox of the entire book: when you stop trying to impress people, you actually become impressive. And if you're sitting there thinking, this sounds exhausting. Do I really have to be this intentional about every interaction? I get it. But here's what I've noticed. The people who are best at this don't experience it as effort. They experience it as relief. Relief from the constant pressure of performing, of managing impressions, of trying to be interesting. When you genuinely focus on the other person, you get a break from yourself. And that, strangely enough, is one of the most liberating feelings in the world. Let's pause here and take stock. In this first half, we've covered the 3 fundamental principles: don't criticize, give appreciation, arouse an eager want, and all 6 ways to make people like you. Here's what I find striking. Look back at those 9 ideas. Not one of them requires money. Not one requires talent. Not one requires a degree or a title. Every single one is free, available to anyone, anywhere, at any time. You don't need permission to listen more. You don't need a budget to smile. You don't need a promotion to make someone feel important. These are the most democratic tools for success ever written down. And yet, be honest, how many of them did you actually practice this past week? I know I miss most of them, most days. That's not a failure. That's the point of the book. It's not about perfection. It's about practice. So here's my challenge for you between now and part 2. Pick one principle. Just one. Maybe it's remembering names. Maybe it's listening without interrupting. Maybe it's finding one sincere thing to appreciate about someone you normally take for granted. Try it. See what happens. Then come back for part 2, where we go even deeper, into the 12 ways to win people to your thinking, and the 9 principles of leadership that can change how you influence everyone around you. If you found this useful, hit that like button and subscribe. And if someone in your life could use a little help in the people skills department, you know exactly who they are. Share this with them. The book is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. First published by Simon & Schuster in 1936. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in part 2. Take care.